All right, so this week we are going over a new concept called mitochondrial inheritance. Write that out here. Mitochondrial inheritance. Mitochondrial inheritance, and we haven't talked about this in previous weeks with our Mendelian inheritance, and so I figured I would put together a little video to help explain what mitochondrial inheritance is and why it behaves the way it does. Just to help you get your mind around it, because this is really cool. And I think it's really fun to understand how this works. So let's get going here. So in the cell, so you'll find as you take science classes that a lot of what we do is progressive improvements on truth. So we told you that all of the DNA in the body, or in the cell, I mean, is contained here in the nucleus. Nucleus. And this is where all the DNA is, with all of the chromosomes. And that is actually false. The DNA is not all in here. That is true that it is, that most of it is in the nucleus, but that is not where all of the DNA in the cell is located. So this is where the 23 pairs of chromosomes, so your 46 pairs of chromosomes are up here. All of the ones that we've talked about up here are in the nucleus. But it turns out that there's more to a cell than the nucleus. Similarly, there is more to a city than just town hall. I mean, the nucleus has the instructions, it's the government for the cell, but unless you've got a fire department and grocery stores and a power station and a sewage system and stuff, then what's the point of having a town hall smack in the middle of nowhere? So there are other parts to this cell. There's something called the Golgi body. I'll draw it in here, kind of like that. There's the Golgi body. We've got the endoplasmic reticulum. A lot of these have really fun names. There's lysosomes. I'll put those over here. There's all sorts of things going on in here, and their jobs are, and they each contribute to making the cell work. Well, there's one of these called the mitochondria, or the mitochondrion. It's individual mitochondria is plural. And it kind of looks like a pill bug. Let me show you a picture here in a sec. Let me write out my little mitochondria here. So this is called a mitochondria. And there's loads of these things all throughout a cell. Mitochondria. Okay. There are loads of these things throughout the cell, and they look to me, at least, like a pill bug. Here's an actual photograph of one inside the cell. It's this big, huge pill-looking thing. So we're inside the cell. So these things are actually really tiny, but because we're so zoomed in, it looks really big. And I don't know, I think of them as pill bugs. Anyway, that's a mitochondria. Now the reason we care about these is these are the powerhouse of the cell. So kind of like in my town analogy, this would be the power plant. It provides all of the energy. So when you eat sugar or food or anything like that, the cells absorb that energy, and then some enzymes out here break it down and extract energy out of it, and then the mitochondria takes that energy and jams it into batteries. It's called ATP. It makes batteries and sends it to all parts of the cell to use to power enzymes and DNA replication and all sorts of things. So this guy is the powerhouse. Oh, that's a terrible color. Let's actually do it so it's legible. Powerhouse. Power. It's called the powerhouse of the cell. Now, what's special about these is they are the only organelle in the body. An organelle is just a little part of the cell. They are the only part of the cell that has its own DNA independent of the nucleus. There's actually a little bit of DNA over here too. And that's fascinating for scientists because there are a couple of interesting things about this mitochondria DNA. First off, it's circular. So if I take this and we zoom in on just that mitochondria, so let's see, so we'll get purple. Okay, so we have the whole mitochondria right here. The first thing about this DNA is it's circular. So all of the DNA that we saw before was in chromosomes like this, and you had it in pairs. It was like a straight stick. But the mitochondrial DNA is in a circle, like a loop, and it's connected to itself. So let me take out that. Ding. So it's like it's a big loop. There's not an end to it. And the only other place where we see that kind of DNA in nature is in bacteria. And it is believed that these mitochondria were bacteria at one point, and that they kind of got absorbed by a cell that had a nucleus, and then that cell with the nucleus decided that that particular bacteria would actually be kept on as hired help because it had developed this miraculous ability to harvest lots and lots of energy. And so we took them on and adopted them as our own, and poof, we have mitochondria. And so because of that, they have their own little miniature chromosome here called mitochondrial DNA, or the name for that, it's MT, and then DNA. Mitochondrial DNA. Now, there aren't many genes on mitochondrial DNA. I can't remember exactly what the real number is, but it's less than 100, which actually isn't very much. There aren't many genes on this, but there are genes, which means that this can make proteins and influence particular traits. Now, the tricky part about this, at the point where we're concerned with it in this class, erase this, is it actually goes back to why eggs are so much bigger than sperm. So let me look that up here quick, just to show you a picture here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So this is what's called a scanning electron micrograph. It's a photograph that's really powerful. Here we go. If you look at this big, huge blob is the egg cell. And all these little tiny blue fishes swimming around it are sperm that are trying to get inside of it. Notice the egg is massive compared to a sperm. It is huge. And this goes back to why women only keep one egg after meiosis, but men keep all 4 of their sperm. Because since it takes so much to run a cell, the men actually only contribute a nucleus, basically. It's their 23 chromosomes with a tail on it. That's it. It's a nucleus with a tail. That's all a sperm is, which means all of those other organelles that it takes to run a cell must come from mom. So instead of making tons and tons of photocopies of all of those internal organelles, she just packs all of the important components into one of the 4 eggs that she makes during meiosis and keeps that one and destroys the other 3. And that one egg has all of the necessities to be a full-blown city. And then the man just contributes his 23 chromosomes and poof, we have a baby. But because the man doesn't contribute any mitochondria, because the mitochondria aren't nucleus, because the man doesn't contribute any mitochondria, every single mitochondria in everyone's body comes from mom. So if mom will give her mitochondrial DNA to, let's see, we've got a son and a daughter. So mom gives all of her mitochondrial DNA to all of her sons and all of her daughters, and dad doesn't give it to anybody. And then this daughter would give it to all of her children, and this son wouldn't pass it to anybody. And because you only have one copy, it's not like you don't have two chromosomes. You can't have a dominant or recessive again, so it's kind of like the Y chromosome in that way. There's no dominant or recessive for mitochondrial traits. And whatever or if mom has a disease that's mitochondrial, every single one of her children will have that disease. But the children of an affected father will not. He won't give it to any of his children because he doesn't give them mitochondria. They don't get the mitochondrial chromosome from dad. So mitochondrial pattern of inheritance on a pedigree would look something like this, where mom is affected and she gives it to every one of her children, no matter what their gender is. But an affected son fails to give it to any of his children, here or here, but both of the affected daughters give it to all of their children. That's mitochondrial inheritance on a pedigree. Mom gives it to all of her children, and only her daughters pass it on to all of their children, and their sons won't give it to any of them. So there's a bit of background on mitochondrial inheritance. Hopefully that helped a little bit. Email me if you have any questions, and have a wonderful weekend.